Welcome, one and all, to the High Performance Human Podcast. It's your man Andy here, and it is the 50th episode of the High Performance Human Podcast, bringing up the half century. And I couldn't think of anyone better to bring in the half century other than Paul McGee, aka the Sumo guy. Jeez Louise, Paul, he's an international speaker, best-selling author, focuses a lot of his attention around resilience, motivation, inspiring leadership all over the world. He has spoken to north of 1 million people already. And I tell you what, 1 million people's not enough when you get to hear this great man. He is from north of England. He supports a hideously average football team. But aside from that slight dent in his what is otherwise sterling reputation, he is just an absolute top human in every single which way. He is the husband of an equally incredible human called Helen, which I had the fortune of meeting earlier this year. And he's just one of the most revered individuals in the business and motivational landscape. Paul McGee, thank you so much for joining me on the High Performance Human Podcast on its 50th episode. How the devil are you?
Mate, first of all, what an introduction. Did my mum write that for you? That's but also congratulations on 50. Loads of people start these kind of things and then the momentum sort of like slips. So it's brilliant that you've done that. And it is really great to be with you. And it's I'd love to say it's a nice sunny day in Warrington, but it's still early morning, so it's dark and it's a little bit chilly, and I'm missing Australia already.
So guys, Paul and his beloved better half Helen, they came over to Australia and did a bit of a tour round, did some talks, and which I was sort of by chance was fortunate enough to also be involved with. And so we got to spend a little bit of time together over the winter months up in the north of Queensland, and it's just spending some time with these guys, both Paul and Helen, was a joy. It was an absolute joy. But Paul he's when we say the sumo guy, and he's going to talk about that. He's going to talk about that, I'm sure, for a little bit. But I read Paul's book off the back of a mutual contact called Rick Rushton, who is, I'm sure, someone that a lot of you would have heard of and has been on the podcast himself. And the one of the best things that I love about the way that you bring your knowledge and awareness, Paul, is the sheer, they say that, or Da Vinci says that simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication. And the way that you bring your knowledge, your awareness, and the way that in which you command attention is so simple. But in that simplicity, there's an absolute brilliance to it. So before I get you to give us a bit of an MO on who you are, can I ask why you even got into this sort of position? Because this isn't for everyone, and lots of people try it and fail miserably, or they just don't have the right effect. Whereas you just do it with, it's almost like divinity. It's weird how easily you connect with people. Is it something that you felt you were born to do?
On reflection, I think we've all got a bit of a unique gift. And I'm a kind of spiritual person, and I feel that your gift is not something just for your benefit, but you will actually find real fulfillment and satisfaction in life when, in essence, one, you find your gift, and then you use your gift, whatever it is, to benefit and support other people. And that doesn't have to be something that's high profile and gets you on stage or any fame or anything like that. But, there are just some people who are amazing with hospitality, people who are just amazing with kids, amazing with numbers, and people who are homemakers and people who are entrepreneurs. And I suppose, I had a very sort of challenging childhood, four father figures by the age of 9, four different schools, ran away from home at the age of 10. Not exactly the most stable of upbringings, but one of the things that I was aware of was I liked drama. I liked acting. I was fine with that. When I went to secondary school, I was the shortest and one of the fattest kids in the whole of the school. I was one of the youngest. But I ended up winning a public speaking competition at school. And I was also pretty good at making my mates laugh, which was good because I reckon I could have been bullied.
Right.
But love my football, which connected with people, made people laugh. And it was almost, maybe I had that talent, but it almost became a bit of a defense mechanism because one, I had to deal with
Mm,
all the, to put it bluntly, the shit going on at home.
mm.
And I guess I kind of used humor a little bit to deal with that. But then with my mates who were taller and more sporty than me, and you know, when you always find someone who's, you know, the short kid, the short fat kid, you know, you are potentially prone to being bullied.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
as I say, the fact that the football was a big thing. Then people respected me because of my knowledge of it, and but also I could make people laugh and disarm them and put on accents and stuff. And then I suppose things just grew and developed. I'm not technology does not interest me, how machines work, nothing. But I've always had a fascination for how humans behave. You know, some backgrounds in behavioral and social psychology. Game changer for me was when I lost my job through ill health with chronic fatigue syndrome, not able to work for 3 years. And then when I finally tried to, you know, get a job, I couldn't. No one would hire me because I couldn't pass a medical. So I kind of returned to ultimately, well, what can I offer the world here? And I had to become self-employed. You know, at least I was able to pass my own medical examination with that one. And it's been not a revolution, an overnight success. You know, I mean, yeah,
Mm,
I spoke to over 1 million people, 40 odd countries, 250,000 book sales of Sumo. That's all great, but it's not overnight.
mm,
It's been an evolution, it's been a journey, it's been a process. So yeah, I do love people. I don't try and develop any techniques. You know, it's not like, well, do you want to use NLP or something else? I'm just Paul McGee. And you mentioned my great friend Rick earlier on, and Rick Rushton. And I think, you know, Rick is just Rick. And
mm.
it's not a question of Rick uses loads of techniques to build rapport. Rick just loves people, and that kind of like shows. And I find people fascinating, and yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
How long's the evolution been going for?
Well, I've been on the planet 60 years, so you could say it's been a longer term thing. But I, I, I interestingly enough, because I actually worked with him in Australia and it opened doors for me. In April 1989, two significant things happened in retrospect. The first one was that's the month and the year, April 1989. I lost my job through ill health.
Hmm.
April 1989 was also the very month and year that Stephen Covey's book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, was published. 19 years after those two events in April 1989, Covey and I got to work together. I spoke at ARIC
Oh,
in two,
wow.
and I think the evolution, I think when I got to the point where I went self-employed, I think I really started to get into personal development. I used to listen to This Ages Me, you know, cassette tapes. And here's something that might be useful for people to think about. It's a phrase I use, and I know Rick uses it as well. Words change worlds. You know, and people are going to hear things on this podcast. It's going to be a phrase, just one phrase. They can listen to a whole episode, but they will be something that someone says, and it's like, whoa, that's a bit of a game changer. And I'm 24 years old at the time. I've got a walking stick because of my illness. I can hardly walk. I can't even wash myself at times. So Helen, who you mentioned earlier on, has to wash me. Not for long term, but she had to do it initially. And someone lends me these cassette tapes, and I can't remember anything other than one line that I heard on this cassette tape. And it was, if I paraphrase it, it was, within every adversity, there is a seed of equal or greater opportunity.
Mm,
Within every adversity, there is a seed of equal or greater opportunity. And I remember just like, whoa, I am really going through some adversity here.
mm,
The illness in the UK at the time wasn't even recognized as a genuine illness. So imagine this, Andy. I'm 24. I can hardly wash myself. I've lost a high flying graduate management trainee job. And yet the doctor looking at me doesn't think it's genuine. It's all in my head. sent me
Mm.
to see a psychiatrist in Liverpool. And if
Wow.
I'm honest with you, I found that, a pretty humiliating experience. Not
Well,
not going to
I think
Liverpool,
well,
not going
going
to
and
Liverpool.
seeing anyone. I was about to say going and seeing anyone in Liverpool for help's probably not a great. Um,
Hey, I've got some great Liverpool mates, but it was a challenge. And but what's interestingly enough, about that experience with the psychiatrist, I only went the once
mm,
because he said to me, "You're actually one of the most positive people I've ever come across. I don't need to see you again. I don't know what the cause of your illness is, but it's clearly not a mental one."
right.
Um, so it's life has definitely been a roller coaster for me. But I suppose one of the things that I've learned is I've learned, I suppose, to when challenges happen, one of the things that people can first do as a metaphor is they look out the window, they look outside of themselves as to what is causing me not to be well in work, what is causing me not to have a great relationship in my personal life. And it's easy to look externally, and that could be part of the reason. But I'm a great believer in not look out the window, hold up the mirror,
Mm,
and
yeah.
look at sometimes at yourself. And I think I've been relatively good, only relatively good at doing some reflection. And
Mm,
it's very easy. And I mean, I talk about this in my talks, to wear the victim t-shirt and play the BSE game, blame someone else and blame the economy and one thing or another. When I set up my own business and became self-employed in 1991, Britain officially went into recession. Inflation was something like 15%, or interest rates, I can't remember which it was. Unemployment was the highest it had been in years. And that's when I went self-employed. Now, you could clearly say, well, you're not going to succeed. And the reason you didn't succeed was because of your external
mm,
circumstances. But Andy, it wasn't a great first year. My turnover was equivalent in Aussie dollars of around 3,000 Aussie dollars in the first year.
right.
So much so, I didn't pay any tax, no national insurance, and my accountant sacked me. But I'd been on invalidity benefit before because I've been ill with chronic fatigue.
Mm,
So it wasn't like a huge financial loss. And one of the things that I did when I would go from appointments from one meeting to another in my little Ford Fiesta is I listened to these audio cassette tapes. And I'd be listening to the Zig Ziglars, I'd be listening to the Tony Robbins. And I guess what I was doing, although I didn't use that term at the time, I was managing my mental diet. I have this phrase: besides God, if you believe in God, who is the most important and influential person you're ever going to talk to? And it's yourself.
mhm.
And I started to not listen to the news and find out how bad the economy's doing. I was listening to the likes of Zig and Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins, and they were inspiring me. And eventually, I suppose that inspiration poured out. I was looking for opportunities. Suddenly, I won a couple of contracts, and things really did begin to develop and evolve from there.
I was going to quote Jim Rohn actually when you with what you were saying just then. He very famously said, "Don't wish for things to be easier. Wish that you were better." Um,
100%.
and it's actually been something that has been very very poignant recently, especially in the sales, retail, hospitality, real estate space, which is obviously where I tend to play quite a bit. And when things do get bad, it's you see, I hear it from the front line on the regular that they, our interest rates are causing a bit of drama. Not that they're anywhere near what you guys experienced in 1990, whatever. Um,
Yeah,
um, you know, uh, our buyers, they just, there's a bit more stock on. Buyers are just holding off now. They're sort of, and I actually threw my toys out of the pram with one team and sort of dragged them down to a vacant property and sort of we worked on some actual art of selling skills and whatnot as well to just show them how much better they could get, right? But
totally.
but I actually feel bad for people that are on the front line that are using these things as excuses because society is being conditioned to be a series. We're all headline readers, right? And whatever the
Yeah.
headline says, we consume as writ, right? So I actually point the if you don't want to point a finger, but I actually feel that leadership and those who are of influence that aren't the media, because we know that media needs to sell papers, and negative bias would suggest that negative newspapers sell more. But
Yep.
the leadership within industries and the influential voices within industry need to be held a hell of a lot more accountable. You talk about holding up the mirror. I think those
Yep.
influential voices need to hold up the bloody mirror now, because when and I want to get your opinion on this actually before I talk about something else. Do you feel that from a success point of view, that needs to evolve, because a lot of the language around things like success and growth and so on and so forth, it's been language that was born on cassette tapes by your Tony Robbins, by your
Mm.
Zig Ziglars and your Coveys and all that sort of stuff, right? um do you feel that, or do you sense, with the volume of exposure that you get to humans, that society is starting to just feel that that is just white noise now, and we as voices, voices of value, to sort of to coin Rick's phrase, do you feel that we need to try and start evolving the way that success is broadcasted?
I'm There is still skepticism in the UK, particularly, not in the US, and I don't know what it'd be in Australia, when sometimes people will introduce me and go, Paul's a motivational speaker.
Right.
And I address the elephant in the room straight away because I say, just so you're aware, I'm not from California. So I'm not going to suggest that tomorrow morning you look at yourself in the mirror going, I'm a tiger, I'm a tiger, I'm a tiger. You can do that in the afternoon. And Rick Rushton swears by it. I'm from Manchester, I say. And then I go, I want to give you some Mancunian motivation. And for me, Mancunian motivation is three things. Number one, tell it as it is. Number two, no bull. And number three, let's be really practical. And then I say to my audience, does that sound reasonable? Yes or yes? Boom.
Mm,
And I think the reason why my style, my approach, and my work has landed well is because I'm not just saying you can be anything you want to be and all
yeah.
that kind of hype. It's like that sense of, because one of my sumo principles is called hippo time is okay. What do hippos do in mud? They wallow. I Some people look almost shocked when so-called motivational speaker says, by the way, folks, it is okay to not always feel okay. To
Mm,
feel mad, bad, or sad is legit. It's okay. Now, one of the points I make also is sometimes it's okay, but it's temporary. It's a detour, it's not a destination. But I think for me, why people, if you talk about success, is I don't say that success or happiness is always about everything going right. And it's learning to manage, that roller coaster journey. And interestingly enough, I had, which I won't go into any detail, I know you're aware of, but I had some really, really desperately sad news, just over a couple of weeks ago. And I was doing a talk 48 hours later. And I didn't go into the detail, but I said, when I was talking about hippo time, I said, as I stand before you today, I need you to be aware that there is some underlying sadness where I'm at the moment. And they just leaned in because it's like all of a sudden this isn't someone who's going, wow, you are this is just a guy who's everything goes right and he's super positive. I said there is an underlying sadness. However, and then I talked about some of the ideas that I use. Now, Sumo as an acronym typically stands for shut up, move on, or stop, understand, move on. Interestingly enough, and I don't want to overload people with detail, but someone who heard me at that event 48 hours after I got this desperately sad news, they emailed me this week and they went, one, I got so much from your session, but actually I really valued the fact that you were open and honest about where you were at. She said, but in fact, she said, I came up with a different definition of sumo based on what you said and what you were going through. And she said, show up, move onwards.
that's
And she
cool.
said, well, you still showed up. And I think people, I don't win every skeptic or cynic over because they've already made their mind up, some people.
Yeah.
But if you're on the fence about motivation and you hear Paul McGee, I tell you, 99 times out of 100, you come off the fence and you go, actually, this guy makes a bit of sense. Because I ground my work in reality, and I do talk about positivity, and I do talk about being solution focused, and I do talk about take some ownership and get rid of the victim t-shirt, and I do talk about the fact that we need to there is something I talk about in my Sumo book which undermines people, and it's like I call it the CIBA syndrome.
Hmm.
CIBA. Can I be asked? And
Mm.
let's be honest, some of the people you work with, the reason they're not successful is not the economy. It's not that vendors are holding on and buyers and whatever. It's can you be asked? And sometimes we can't be asked. We can and some people, I want to challenge those watching and listening. Don't confuse activity with effectiveness. Part of someone's activity is they are now watching or listening to this.
Hmm.
So I go, oh yeah, yeah, and I'm reading and I'm listening to other podcasts and I'm listening to audiobooks. Great, but that doesn't mean you're going to be successful and even more effective. What are you going to take from what I'm saying, from what Andy is sharing, and all his other guests? Don't confuse activity with effectiveness. Do you need to listen? Do you need to manage your mental diet? 100%. But guess what? Then you've got to get off your ass and do something.
Hmm.
So, so has success, what people think of success, evolved? On one level, I don't know. But I'll also tell you this: 30 years ago, Tony Robbins came to the UK for the first time, and I was in the room with him. When I say I was in the room with him, there were a few hundred other people there as well. It wasn't in the thousands then; it was only the hundreds. And he actually said to people, "Show of hands, how many of you would say you are successful?" And I put my hand up because I thought, yeah, I am. I am. I know what I've overcome and what I'm doing. And I looked around the room and there was hardly any hands up. And he said, do you know why? There's many reasons why you haven't put your hands up, some of you. Some of you don't want to appear arrogant or whatever. But maybe one of the reasons why you haven't raised your hand is you've never really asked yourself, what does success look like for me?
Hmm.
And for me, what I realize increasingly, and I've been on this planet 60 years, is I have got comfortable and clear on what success means to me.
Hmm.
And therefore I can hold my hand up and go, yeah, based on what my criteria of success is, I'm good. That doesn't mean I've arrived and therefore I've reached my goal, my pinnacle, because I don't actually think it is a destination you ever really ultimately arrive at. And I would like to my dying day on this planet to still feel that in some way I'm adding value to someone else's life. Um, but I have defined what success means. And that's not just a work thing, but it's about my personal life as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah. There's so many team. I think you're going to need to go and listen to that last few minutes more than once because I think each time you replay that, you'll get something else. This is why, what I think probably, I think, I know the reason why I resonate with your work as much as I do is the practicality of it.
Yeah.
That's, that is exactly why I resonate. And I talk about it when we're looking at it from a mental health perspective and society's acceptance of mental health as a legitimate condition. You talk about what you faced with your chronic fatigue, right? And
Mm.
and everybody's still talking about mental health, but the practicality of those conversations sometimes is still, well, I say sometimes, a lot of the time, it's still tremendously lacking
Yeah.
in practicality. It is very much you've got to go and give yourself space and give yourself a chance to breathe and go take time for yourself. I mean, it's not possible when you're running a family, you've got young kids, you've got job, you've got this, you got that, you got the other, you got bills, you got like the real world isn't going to stop for you just because you're
Yeah.
not very happy. Um, and
Absolutely.
and that's why your stuff in sumo and sumo is just such an incredible set of principles that is perfectly packaged by that one acronym. Now, I do need to ask you the question that we always ask all of our guests, and normally I ask it towards the start, but I'm just so engrossed in everything that you got to say, man. I've just been taken away. And I'm very, very grateful. So, I always ask all of our guests what their definition of a high performance human is, because I've got my take on it, which is a combination of success, connection, influence, and happiness, and they all survive in an ecosystem where one can't survive without the other. What's your definition?
Well, interestingly enough, this is not the first time you've asked me this question. Earlier this year, I'm listening to you in Cairns, and you had given everyone a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper, it said, my definition of a high performance human is dot, dot, dot. And this was my first thing that I wrote down, and I actually kept it. And I didn't know at the time that we were going to have this conversation, but I put what my definition is. So I'm going to read it out. Someone who seeks to maximize their potential within the context of their own circumstances.
I love it.
Someone who seeks to maximize their potential within the context of their own circumstances. Because and I've done quite a lot of work in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
If you're, definition of high performance for some people, not for men all, clearly, but for some could be, I got to the end of the day today and I'm still alive.
Yep.
High performance for some people could be, I got up and I walked me 3 miles to get the water and I came back and I'm hoping I might get to go to school tomorrow.
Mm.
Within the context of their own circumstances, we've got to sometimes be aware. Now, the thing is, all right, I'm from a working class background in the north of England, but I would not describe myself label myself as working class anymore. And there is actually in the written in the New Testament actually is this little phrase: to whom much is given, much is expected. And I see that as a challenge because we can get all political about stuff and about privilege. I don't want to make the word privilege a stick to beat anyone out with. I don't want it to be a political issue. I just want to say I'm fortunate to have been born in the democracy I've been born in, with the opportunity where I could go to school, free access to education. I'm at an age where even when I went to university, I didn't even have to pay for that. And that is a privilege, and so what am I going to do with it? Not going to beat myself up. I'm a 60-year-old white male. No, I'm not going to apologize for that. What I'm going to do is embrace the privilege of life and the opportunities I've been given, because a load of people haven't been given that. And a load of people have had a bad start in life. I work I'm going to do some work for at a conference for foster carers. And feel a little bit emotional thinking about this. And I was chatting to one of the foster carers, and she was saying to me how some children, in the womb are being damaged because their mother was a drug addict or an alcoholic. And I can't therefore go, you can be anything you want to be, just believe in yourself, take responsibility. Hey, we're not all born equal with those equal opportunities. And this woman just gets alongside kids, some who really have not had the privilege of what many of us have had, and just tries to help these damaged kids who were damaged even before they came out of the flipping mother's womb. So I know I'm getting a little bit heavy, but what I want to also do is say, okay, so come on, suck it up, Buttercup. We've got a lot going for us. And I think, let's make the most of whatever flipping gifts or talents we've got, of course, to benefit us, but to benefit other people as well. If you're in real estate, the biggest investment anyone's going to make is in their own property. We talked about worlds change worlds earlier on, but, your environment can just make a massive difference. And some people, if they can be asked, they can make a massive difference in loads of people's lives. And so I'm not, yes, I say, I'm not going to apologize. I'm going to accept I've been fortunate compared to a lot of people, despite my own challenging background. You know, I've got a lot. I've got a lot to be thankful for. So let's get on and make the most of this privilege that we call life.
And I think it really does tie in what you mentioned earlier about the part of your book with respect to hippo time, right? Because a lot of people, they struggle to suck it up and crack on because they don't give themselves a chance to accept, process, you know, allow for the reality to sink in, right?
Yeah,
And they constantly push against the tide in denial of their feelings or emotions or what have you, whether it's to save face or ego, pride, whatever you want to call it,
yeah,
right? Um, and but I think those two parts of this conversation so far tie in tremendously well. And it's interesting. So in that talk where that Paul was involved, that Paul was in the audience for that time, I mentioned an incredible human, Francesca Dean, who has got cerebral palsy. She's a cerebral palsy warrior, and she talks about like your version of show up, move on. That version of the acronym.
mm,
That was her definition of high performance human, to keep turning up uh,
yeah,
because someone wants to see you, someone wants to meet you, or and that what you've just said there, to whom much is given, much is expected. Um, I think we do have a responsibility, and that's where I feel it kind of comes into the part of the conversation I talked about leadership. Because we have a responsibility. Motivation is such a dopamine temporary thing. We have a responsibility to help people to make the most of their reality instead of superimposing what we believe reality should be for them. And
mm,
I think that's where a lot of people tend to really, really struggle when it comes to taking in and consuming some of the education that's out there, because they listen to a speaker, whoever it may be, and this speaker says, I get up at 5 a.m. and I do this and I do that and I eat 3 beans and 7 things and I measure every single grain of whatever it is and blah 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 blah. And for the majority of people, and for the majority of people listen to this podcast, as soon as you hear something like that doesn't compute with their existence, it becomes almost an impossible task for them, because
mm,
it almost makes them lament their own circumstances even further, right?
yeah.
So
Mhm.
while we're on this topic, I wanted to ask you, for those people that really do struggle to understand knowledge, like motivation and moving forward and shut up, move on, and what have you, the ones that's really struggled to interpret it into their own circumstances, what are sort of one or two or three different little bits of advice or wisdom that you could share with them that can maybe help them to stop, breathe, and be able to interpret that information so that it works for their circumstances?
I think it comes back to the point I mentioned earlier on, Andy. Define what success means for you.
Mm.
So, and you realize that there are some people who are part of the 5 a.m. club and they do this and they do that and they've run a marathon before breakfast, etc., etc. But it's just like, great, that's what success means for you. I've got a different version of it. But so I think one is get comfortable with, actually some people, let's be honest, they can moan about, well, I've not got as much money, da 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 da. Okay, look, what does success really mean for you?
Mm.
Because actually you're on so and so income and you get by. You got a good relationship at home. Maybe you've got kids, you get on well with them, you enjoy taking them to the footy, to the cricket, whatever. And then, so why, actually, you're doing great. Maybe you are doing great for what you want great and success to look like for you. Other people are on a stage telling you what you need to be. No, reject that. You decide what you want to be. I don't tell anybody what they need to be. I'm one for, here's the mirror. Have a look at it. See what you think.
Yeah.
I ask people questions. So about being practical, I've got these 7 questions to help you sumo. That issue or that challenge going on in your life that's stressing you out and you've not been able to let go of, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10's death or the end of the world, where is it? How important will it be in 6 months' time? I talk about sometimes we focus so much on the problem. Yeah, but how can you influence or improve the situation? I'm not telling people this is what you need to do to influence or improve the situation. I give people some space. I ask them some questions. I give them some insights. I'm all about empowering people to be the best version of themselves that they want to be.
Mm.
And so I'm very much, as I said to you before, I tell it as it is, no bull. So that's why I share my struggles as well as my successes. And I also think what we underestimate is the power of a small step. A small step taken consistently over time is going to take you a long way. And I think
Mm.
what undermines people is they hear these amazing speakers but often those speakers, let's be honest, are the outliers.
Yeah.
They are the outliers. And it's great when you've got, and don't no disrespect to someone who might be listening to this, watching it, who's an Olympian. But if you are an Olympic gold medalist or a medalist of any sort, your life is very different to the average Joe. You've been given loads of support, loads of time, all access to coaches, and then you go, so if I can do it, anybody can. Bullshit. Right? What do you mean if you can do it, anyone else can? Bullshit. I'm 5'7". I don't care how much you tell me to believe I can be an amazing basketball player. I've got a funny feeling I'm not going to be. And
Yeah.
also, when your set of circumstances are massively different to mine, I mean, and so let's just cut the bull and let's just really think, what does success mean for me? And I can get inspiration from the gold medalist. Of course I can. But I'm not going to feel guilty because I've not done what they've done, because I ain't got the life they've got, the support systems they've got. And, so let's celebrate their amazing success. Let's be inspired by what they've done, but let's not therefore feel guilty because my life doesn't look like their life. Of course it doesn't, for a load of good reasons. But
Mm.
your life, for what you think is success, what you think happiness is for you, embrace what that looks like for you. I spent time actually staying with Rick Rushton, who we mentioned, and he's there with his family. He's obsessed by his granddaughter, and rightly so. He's feeding the cows. He's getting me to feed the cows with these flipping pieces of bread. And we're having an amazing time. And you go, yeah, but Rick travels here. He's on big stages. But I was at my happiest almost on my trip in Australia when I'm just chilling out with friends,
Yeah.
not necessarily when I'm always on a stage. And I think we sometimes project, as speakers like myself, if we're not careful, we project what we think success is on other people, and people kind of go, well, I can't do that. It's too big a goal. It's too big a jump. It's too big a leap. Fine. I'm holding up a mirror. I'm sharing some tools with you I think are going to help you get the best out of yourself, get the best out of others, and get the best out of life.
Yeah.
If you want to use them, use them. If these help you with some of your challenges, brilliant. But I'm not going to stand on a stage and say, I've sold nearly 500,000 books. I've spoken to over 1 million people. I've got X amount of followers on Instagram and TikTok. And you can be anything you want to be. And, if I can do it, you can. Look, hey, what success look like for you? And keep taking those daily small steps, because the consistency of our choices compounds,
Yeah.
right? The day-to-day non-sexy stuff you do, the little things you do, that's what adds up. So that was a long answer to a question that most of you have even forgotten what was the flipping question, but I hope there's some insights there for you. And again, if you're an Olympic gold medalist, I celebrate you. You've done well. You're inspirational, but that doesn't mean so I'm not insulting people who've done those amazing things. I'm just saying, let's build a bit of reality into what we're talking about.
And that's where the disconnect lies, right? Because those achievements are phenomenal, but I think, and I actually don't blame the gold medalist for. I think whoever's managing or managing them in their transition to being a speaker or whatever it is, there's not that understanding that you need to translate this into terms that people can actually go away and inspire themselves, instead of having you on a poster on their gym that they don't go into that often. The reason why I bring it up is because I had a reminder of poor leadership from someone who I was listening to talk, and the very first thing that that person said to the group, to the room of 200-300 people, whatever was it was just a series of commands. It was, get up at 5 a.m. If you want to be successful, get up at 5 a.m. Do this, do that, do the other. And I'm looking at the state of this real estate space that I'm focused on right now. And it was a huge penny drop moment with respect to this point, which is, we can't dictate to people if it doesn't befit their lives, because all it's going to do is actually grow not guilt, not just guilt, but resentment for the lives, for their lives and the people within their lives, right? It's going to make them look at their kids and go, "You're getting in my way,"
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
which is just the worst.
It's potentially damaging,
Yeah.
isn't it? And it also can become demotivational because you can go, well, I'm not like that. And then you get this short guy from Manchester talking about sumo, and I'm talking about managing 30 women on the economy beef burger line. And I learned two main lessons. One, don't eat economy beef burgers because no goes into them. And I talk about different things like that, but then I just keep it real, share some stuff, talk about, hey, I wrote a Sunday Times best-selling book. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, it got rejected 13 times. And also, I'm the motivational speaker, but I need hippo time. And,
Yeah.
and suddenly it's like, this guy's real. And again, no disrespect if you climb mountains, but when I talk about, we're obsessed in the UK with flipping motivational conferences where we've got a mountaineer, right?
Mm.
We're obsessed with it. The biggest challenge most people on this planet face is not how to overcome frostbite, but it is, how do I win more business, motivate myself, get on better with my partner, with my kids. So I actually find that my lack of major achievements on one level
Mm.
works for me, because I think somebody, you know what, the thing that people say, probably the number one thing people say about my stuff, they say a few things. One of the key words, relatable.
Yeah.
I could relate to what you said,
100%.
because I'm not conquering Everest for the 15th time. And by the way, I'm still, there are some people now who are flipping swearing at me because they've climbed Everest and they've overcome later challenges. I'm sorry, we'll talk about it over a coffee in Melbourne someday. It's got its place, of course it has. It's inspirational, wonderful. We need that. It's amazing. But let's also recognize the ordinary people who are trying to do extraordinary things.
Yeah,
The
100%.
context of their circumstances, who don't get it right all the time, who make mistakes. It's like I wrote a book called How to Succeed with People. My wife said to me, you should read that sometime. And that's my reality. That's my reality. But I go back to small steps and,
Yeah.
and do stuff that is relatable for people, because then I think, hey, then it is amazing what people can change, because they don't do it from a sense of guilt or resentment. They go through it from, hey, well, if that flipping guy can do some stuff, maybe I can start to apply what would work for me. And
Mm.
those small wins, those small steps, over time, they make a difference.
They really, really do. I've got a couple of last questions for you if I can. And I want to come back to something that you said really quite early on in the conversation, and sort of pose a question to you. We were talking about adversity and how the the adversities you faced, and the chronic fatigue, being fired was, that adversity sort of pushed you into the direction that you're in now. And it's something that I've been marinating on a little bit. And I'd love to work out what the magic pill was. Is adversity, do you think that is adversity necessary when it comes to finding what that gift is and actually executing on that gift. Because so many times, and I've said it as well, about the mental health thing being the best bad thing that's ever happened to me, or best things come badly wrapped. And from a human point of view, we seem to have this condition as human beings whereby we have to have something really bad go on for us to, like you said, have that seed of opportunity get planted within our lives. Do you reckon that it's necessary?
Well, I think it was Billy Connolly who said some people haven't had a bad enough childhood to become a success in life. And I get that, but I don't think that's the whole story. I do think sometimes adversity can be the trigger, because adversity can be that shut up moment,
Mm,
that get off autopilot. What is this about? There are people who've had, at early age, have had like a big health scare, and it is the shut up moment. But again, what about the people who are watching and listening? You're going, oh man, alive. I've had a great, I've come a stable background. My mum and dad love me. I've got a great marriage. I love my kids. Can I not be successful? No,
yeah,
you can. Of course we can. We're all unique individuals. And what we often tend to hear is the adversity stories.
yeah,
And therefore we think, as Billy Connolly said, we need that bad experience in order to achieve success. That isn't the case. That those aren't necessarily the outlier stories, but there are loads of people who actually, stable background, loving family, did well at school, haven't had any major health problems, wasn't bullied. Uh, but do you know what? I could be asked. And I
mhm,
worked and I focused and I've achieved.
yeah.
Their stories are just as significant and as necessary to hear as the adversity ones. But the adversity stories, they play on the human emotions more. And again, if we're not careful, we can make people kind of go, oh my days, have I got to have something bad happen to me? So what I'll often say to people is, there was a series of events that have impacted who I am today. But I'm 60. It's taken me a long time to learn these lessons. When I'm sharing stuff with people, I'm going, you don't need bad experiences to learn these lessons
Mm,
at all. Yeah, and what I'm thrilled about, Sumo has been out over 19 years. And the thing that brings me so much joy at times is I get emails from young people who are 17 and 18 and who say, oh, my mum, I heard you speak recently. She bought this book for me and I've really found it helpful. And I'm going, oh my days, you weren't born when that book came out.
yeah, wow.
And it's helping you. And there's this phrase, and one of the phrases I use in the book, you don't have to be ill to get better. In other words, life could be going really well, but you can still improve. So, does adversity open the door to potential and opportunity? Of course it does. But sometimes stability and love and security can also do the same.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Paul, I can't express the gratitude that I'm feeling for having you come on this show of mine. You're an absolute superstar of a human being, and you do it in such a like we've said before, do it in such a real way, which just makes it so much easier for people to understand what you can do with knowledge, awareness, and like you said, a little bit of go to just crack on, to just show up and move on. It's so incredible. And the thing is, as I mentioned very, very fleetingly, it's a dopamine hit. But what Paul does to us, team, is provide something that feels tangible. And because it feels tangible, it feels more permanent in its impact. And it's just phenomenal stuff, man. It really, really is. And you are one of the best in the world. There is no doubt about it. But as I round us off this episode and let you crack on with your day, there's always one question that I ask to end the show. And you've mentioned there, even when things are going well, you can still do that a little bit better. And and I know, as I know you now, I know that you'll always be looking for ways to get better. Um, what is one thing that you're looking to? What is one thing, if there was one thing out of the various things that you're looking at, what is one thing that you're working on right now as you look towards your next version of yourself?
Sure. I had an amazing time in Australia back in August when we got together. That'd been the first time I'd been back in Oz since COVID. So I haven't
Mm.
been there since 2019. One of the things I am working on is basically, Andy, I want to get back to Australia a little bit more often than I have been. And so I'm actually exploring having some kind of like speaker agent out in Australia because I love the people there. Um, your coffee's pretty good, and 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 you know what? I can cope with your climate. I really can. I really. And so actually, one of the things, what matters to me is being around people who I love being with, and if I can get a bit of sunshine along with it, then I embrace that a lot. So actually, the thing that I am, and I've got a contact from someone who said, right, I'm going to put you in touch with this person, but I'm open to other suggestions from anyone else. I want to get out there a little bit more. I don't want it to be another 5 years before I'm out in basically what is my second home.
Well, we will welcome you with open arms, but get the ticker tape parade out and get all the signs as you touch down in whichever part of Australia you decide to reside for the time being. Well, we will welcome you quite happily. So please, 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 if anybody is listening that can maybe help with that, please make sure that you reach out to me. Or obviously, you can reach out to Paul directly. I'll make sure that I'll put his information, website, and LinkedIn profile as normal into the show notes. I'll also put a link in for his book, Sumo, because it's it's such an easy book to read, but it's so profound in its impact. That is the reason why it's done as well as it's done. Paul McGee, thank you so much, my man. It's been beyond a pleasure, and I can only hope that we get to do this again very soon.
Been brilliant, mate. Really has thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, then, team. On behalf of Paul and myself, thank you for joining us. I'm sure you got lots and lots of value. I'm going to be going and re-listening to this, of that there is no doubt. Until next time, though, my friends, thank you as well, by the way, for joining me for this 50th episode. Thank you for those that have been here since day one and have listened to all 50. Your support has been absolutely tremendous, and it's really fueled a fire for this thing that I'm enjoying so much. So thank you for everybody that's supported. Until next time, though, team, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, and we'll catch you again in episode 51.